A billionaire came home early, and what he saw stopped his heart cold. His 6-year-old daughter, crying, bruised, and holding a mop. What she whispered next will haunt every parent who's ever trusted the wrong person. That if this story made your heart pause, even for a second, subscribe now. We tell stories that don't just entertain, they reveal, they heal, and they change lives. The keys jingled in Darius Cole's hand as he pushed open the front door of his luxury home, the kind of door that never expected to be unlocked before 9 p.m., the kind that whispered quiet wealth with every polished hinge. He had cancelled a high-stakes board meeting last minute, a rare occurrence for the billionaire investor whose time was sold in seconds. But today he wanted to do something simple, something human. He'd bought Maya's favorite vanilla ice cream with rainbow sprinkles from the corner shop, the same one they used to visit before life turned into boardrooms and bereavement. It had been 2 years since his wife passed, and since then, he'd tried to buy stability for his daughter, chefs, tutors, therapists, and a live-in nanny, all meant to fill the void. Vanessa came highly recommended, well-mannered, credentialed, and approved by his new fiancée, Kira. Darius had trusted the structure, believed in the resumes, and assumed Maya was fine. As he moved through the foyer, the marble floor echoed back only his steps. No cartoon sounds, no laughter, no music. Instead, something off. A sound so subtle most wouldn't have heard it, but he did. Crying. Not loud, not wailing, but soft and strained, the kind of cry that tries not to exist. He paused, every instinct in him flaring. The sound led him to the kitchen. That's when he froze. Maya, his baby girl, stood in front of the sink, clutching a mop nearly twice her size. Her little arms were shaking, her jeans ripped, her shirt clinging too tight, and worst of all, red marks across her arms, visible even from a distance. Scratches. Bruises. Fresh and old. One of her eyes looked slightly swollen. The mop clattered to the floor as she turned and gasped, "Daddy," as if caught stealing. She tried to hide her arms behind her. Darius rushed forward and knelt beside her. "Maya, baby, what happened?" His voice cracked. She looked down, barely whispering, "I was too slow mopping." He blinked, confused and horrified. "Who made you do this?" She hesitated, then muttered, "Miss Vanessa." The world tilted. Darius's grip on reality shattered like glass. The woman he trusted to protect his child was the one hurting her. Darius's breath caught in his chest as Maya's trembling form tried to shrink into itself. Her words looped in his mind like an alarm, "Miss Vanessa." He looked into his daughter's eyes and saw not just pain, but fear, the kind that didn't come from a single moment but from many. He gently lifted her arm, seeing the bruises up close, the discoloration, the healing scratches. Some fresh, some older. The realization hit harder than any boardroom betrayal. His daughter had been hurting under his own roof, while he was busy closing deals and giving speeches about legacy and impact. "She says I mess everything up," Maya whispered, barely audible. "She says I have to work or she'll send me away like mommy." Darius's heart cracked. He pulled Maya into his chest instantly, holding her close, shielding her like he should have long before. "No one is sending you anywhere. Do you hear me? Not ever." She nodded, clutching his suit with desperate fingers. That's when he heard it. Footsteps from the hallway. Deliberate. Calm. Confident. He turned sharply, still holding Maya in his arms. Vanessa stood at the archway holding a laundry basket, expression unreadable. She blinked once at the sight of him, surprised but not panicked. "Oh," she said smoothly. "You're home early." Darius rose slowly, his expression darkening like a gathering storm. "What did you do to my daughter?" Vanessa's eyes flicked to Maya, then back to him. "Excuse me?" Her tone feigned confusion. Darius took a step forward, fury coiled beneath his skin. The bruises. The crying. Making her mop the damn floor like a servant. "She's 6. Vanessa sighed and placed the basket down. "Mr. Cole, children need structure. She broke 2 glasses this morning. She's been acting out. I don't care if she shattered every window in this house." "You laid hands on her," he snapped. Vanessa's voice sharpened. "I raised 3 boys. You weren't here. Someone had to keep her in line." Maya flinched again. That was all Darius needed to see. He turned to his daughter and whispered, "Go to your room, baby." She obeyed instantly, disappearing down the hallway like a leaf in a storm. Darius faced Vanessa with a fury that burned through every thread of his tailored suit. "Pack your things," he said, voice low. "You're done here." Vanessa didn't move. She folded her arms with calculated calm, her lips curling slightly in defiance. You're really going to ruin my career over a few swats, she said coldly. Do you know how many families would kill for a nanny like me? Darius stepped closer, his body taut with rage, but his voice stayed steady. Then let them have you. Because this is the last time you'll ever be in the same house as my daughter. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. You think this is abuse? You've been gone half the time, chasing deals and signing contracts. I did what you weren't here to do, discipline. You didn't discipline, Darius snapped. You terrified her. She's 6. Not your employee. Not your soldier. My daughter. The words struck with precision, sharpened by guilt and shame that clawed beneath his fury. Vanessa opened her mouth to respond, but she stopped. Something in his tone, his stance, his eyes, told her there was no salvaging this. She was used to power, to bluffing her way out of tight corners with charm and resumes. But this wasn't a man negotiating, this was a father who'd seen enough. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the guest wing, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown. Darius stood in place, breath shallow, jaw clenched. He could still hear Maya's voice in his head, that fragile whisper, she says I have to work or she'll send me away like mommy. He felt like the ground beneath him was vanishing, like everything he'd built had been balancing on a lie, one he told himself to feel less guilty about his absence. He turned and walked briskly down the hall, heart pounding as he reached Maya's room. He knocked softly and opened the door. She was curled up on her bed, still in the same stained clothes, knees pulled to her chest. She looked up, eyes puffy. He walked in and sat beside her. She's leaving, he said gently. She won't ever be back. You're safe now. Maya blinked, unsure whether to believe him. Promise? Darius nodded, brushing hair from her face. I promise on everything I have. No one will hurt you again. She crawled into his lap without a word, and as she curled into his chest, he felt the full weight of his failure, but also the beginnings of redemption. Darius didn't sleep that night. He sat at the edge of Maya's bed long after she had cried herself into sleep, her tiny hand still wrapped around his finger as if afraid he'd disappear again. He looked at the bruises on her arms, each one like a silent accusation, a mark of how blind he'd been. The empire he'd built, offshore accounts, luxury estates, equity deals, none of it had protected the one person who needed him most. And the thought that she had been living in fear, silently, inside the walls of his own house, made his stomach turn. At sunrise, he made 2 calls. First to his attorney, instructing him to terminate Vanessa's employment and start proceedings for formal charges. Second to a private investigator, not a firm that handled corporate espionage, but a former child services agent who specialized in domestic abuse cases. He wasn't going to let Vanessa walk out and vanish like smoke. He wanted the truth. Within 48 hours, the report landed on his desk in a thick manila envelope. What he read made his blood run cold. Vanessa Hill wasn't her real name. Her legal name was Vanessa Greeks. She had changed it 4 years ago following a dismissed negligence case in Colorado, where a family accused her of emotional harm and excessive discipline. The case had fallen apart due to lack of physical evidence and weak follow-up. But the pattern didn't end there. The investigator had tracked down 2 more families in different states who had employed her. One filed a school report after their child was diagnosed with behavioral trauma. Another withdrew their son mid-year citing emotional instability, under Vanessa's care. Each family left quietly, relocating, filing no official charges. Vanessa had moved from state to state, just under the radar, rebranding herself each time. No criminal record. Clean social media. Strong references crafted just enough to avoid suspicion. Darius stared at the files in disbelief. The woman he had hired, welcomed into his home, trusted with his daughter, had a history of pain trailing behind her, and he had missed every sign. The weight of that failure was suffocating. He stood and looked out his office window, the skyline shining like success. But it was hollow. What mattered now wasn't salvaging his reputation. It was protecting Maya. And that meant making sure Vanessa never touched another child again. Darius stormed into the investigator's office, report clutched in his hand, his face a mix of rage and disbelief. How the hell wasn't this caught? He barked. The investigator remained calm, leaning back in his chair. Because people like Vanessa know how to game the system. She used alias variations, changed addresses frequently, scrubbed her social profiles, and always left before anything stuck. And frankly, most people don't dig deep unless there's already a crisis. Darius paced the room, jaw tight. But I was supposed to be smarter than this. I run background checks on billion-dollar deals, and I let a predator into my home. The investigator nodded. You're not the first. One of the families refused to speak to me. Said they'd buried it, moved on. But one mother, she came forward. She's flying back from Atlanta. She wants to testify. Darius's fists clenched. Good. I want every truth on record. She'll face the consequences she dodged for years. That same evening, Darius handed everything to the authorities. The report, the interviews, the school records, all of it. The case was opened officially, and within hours, Vanessa was arrested. No bail. No warning. The nanny who had once entered his home with a practiced smile and perfect references was now sitting in a cold holding cell, stripped of every fabricated credential. But that wasn't enough. The media got hold of it after a court clerk leaked the case. Headlines ran wild. Respected nanny faces charges of child abuse. Dark past uncovered. How many families were hurt? Reporters camped outside Darius's estate. Requests for interviews flooded his publicist's phone. But Darius refused to speak. Not to save face. Not for PR. Because this wasn't a scandal. It was a scar. One that wouldn't be healed by talking, but by action. He took a leave of absence from the board. Cancelled 2 high-level investment summits. He didn't tell the world why. He told Maya. He told her every morning when he made her pancakes, when he read to her before bed, when he asked her about her dreams and didn't check his phone once. Maya didn't speak much in those first few days. But she watched. And slowly, she began to trust his presence again. Because this time, he didn't leave. This time, he didn't look away. And this time, he wasn't going to let silence be louder than truth. The days passed slowly, intentionally. Darius was no longer the man whose schedule was managed down to the minute. He turned off his calendar alerts, silenced his team chats, and let go of business meetings that once felt life or death. Instead, he woke up with Maya, made breakfast himself, and poured her cereal into dinosaur bowls she hadn't touched in months. She still didn't talk much, but he was learning to listen without words. Her drawings spoke volumes, stick figures with teardrops, one small, one tall, a dark red scribble near the edges. He saved every picture, reading them like letters from a place where pain had no language. Her trust was fragile, rebuilding in tiny pieces. One evening, after a warm bath and a bedtime story, Maya finally spoke. "Daddy," she whispered, staring at the ceiling, "will she come back when the police let her go?" The question sliced through him. He sat up straighter, looked into her eyes, and shook his head. "No, sweetheart. She won't. I won't let anyone hurt you again. Not ever." She blinked, and then gently touched his chin with her tiny fingers. "You were gone a lot." His throat tightened. He nodded. "I know. But I'm not leaving again." She leaned into his chest, her voice a little lighter. "Promise." He wrapped his arms around her, sealing the vow. Forever. Outside the courtroom, the media stormed, but inside, Darius sat quietly, his suit crisp, his hand holding Maya's. At the bench sat Vanessa, no longer composed. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow. There were no character witnesses, no glowing recommendations this time. Just reports, photos, and testimony. Maya didn't have to speak. The bruises had already told her story. The judge's voice rang clear. Vanessa Griggs, 3 years in state prison, 2 years probation, mandatory psychological therapy. She didn't argue. She didn't look back. And for the first time, Maya's eyes didn't flinch when she saw her. Darius bent and whispered, "It's over now." That weekend, he took Maya to the same park her mother used to take her. The grass was green, the air was warm, and her laughter came back like spring. She ran with her arms wide, yellow sundress fluttering. Darius sat on the bench, watching her, not as a CEO or a billionaire, but as a father who had finally shown up. And in that moment, the only thing that mattered in his empire was the smile on his daughter's face. That Maya's laughter rang out across the open field like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds, light and free and real. She ran barefoot through the grass, her yellow sundress catching the breeze, her afro puff bouncing with each step as if the weight she had carried was finally lifting. Darius sat on the park bench watching her with the kind of attention he once reserved only for market charts and boardroom projections. But this was different. This was purpose without pressure, love without condition. Every giggle, every stumble, every glance back toward him was another thread woven into the bond he had almost lost. She turned suddenly and ran back to him, breathless and glowing, collapsing into his lap with a content sigh. "I'm tired," she said with a grin. Darius wrapped his arms around her and kissed the top of her head. "That's a good tired," he said. "Means you played hard." She looked up at him with serious eyes. "Daddy, Can we do this every Saturday? He didn't hesitate. Every one. Just you and me. She smiled and rested her head on his chest, and in that quiet moment, Darius felt something settle inside him, something he hadn't known he was missing until now. It wasn't just peace, it was presence. That night, back at home, Darius tucked her in personally. No nanny, no assistant, no staff. He brushed her hair gently, humming a lullaby his late wife used to sing, his hands remembering every curve of her little face, every feature that connected her to the woman they both missed. After Maya fell asleep, he sat at the edge of her bed and stared into the darkness, not haunted, but humbled. He thought about how close he had come to missing this forever. About the silence he had mistaken for comfort, the bruises he hadn't seen because he hadn't been looking. He thought about the way Maya had curled into his arms at the park, safe and trusting, and how fragile that trust had been. He knew now that love wasn't something you could outsource, and protection wasn't a contract you signed, it was a promise you kept. And from this moment forward, he vowed never to look away again. In the next room, his phone buzzed with calls from board members, news stations, and lawyers. He turned it face down, stood up, and walked back to Maya's side. Because nothing else in the world mattered more than being the father she always needed him to be. The following week unfolded not with grand gestures or public statements, but with small, consistent acts that built trust brick by brick. Darius knew he couldn't undo the past, but he could shape the present with precision. He started showing up at Maya's school every morning, walking her to class, waiting until she looked back from the door and smiled before he left. He met with her teachers, joined her therapy sessions, and sat with the specialists instead of sending staff. He no longer looked for updates through reports, he listened to Maya. Not just to her words, but to her drawings, her silences, her stories about playground games and books with happy endings. Her eyes started to soften again, her voice less guarded, and every night she fell asleep with a little more peace in her chest. Darius, too, was changing. He hadn't touched his portfolio in over 10 days. The press still hounded him, headlines still circled, but he gave no interviews, issued no statements. Let them talk. The only headline that mattered now was the one Maya wrote with her recovery. One evening, as they sat on the living room floor culling together, she asked him, "Was I bad?" The crayon slipped from his hand. He turned to her gently. "No, baby. You were never bad. You were brave. So brave." She looked down. "But I broke the glasses and messed up the kitchen. That's when she got mad." He cupped her face carefully, afraid even his touch might be too much. "Sweetheart, accidents aren't bad. And people who love you don't hurt you for mistakes. They help you grow. Vanessa was wrong. She was very wrong." Maya's eyes glistened, but she nodded slowly. "Okay," she whispered. She crawled into his lap and hugged him without saying anything else. And in that silence, Darius felt the apology form, not in words, but in the way he held her tighter, in the way he didn't check his phone, in the way his breathing synced with hers. It was an apology for not being there, for trusting the wrong person, for letting fear and ambition cloud what truly mattered. He would never say sorry just once. He would live it daily. And she would feel it, not just hear it. That was the kind of father he had to be now. Not perfect. Not powerful. Present. Saturday morning came with golden sunlight flooding through the wide windows of the Cole estate, but the house felt different now. Not because anything had changed outwardly, same marble floors, same clean hallways, but because Maya's laughter was now part of it again, bouncing off the walls like it belonged there. Darius stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes with clumsy confidence while Maya sat at the island in a sunflower yellow hoodie, giggling every time he messed up the flip. He burned one and made a face, and she stuck out her tongue, pretending to grade his cooking with an invisible scoreboard. These moments, small, silly, unplanned, were the ones he had missed while chasing contracts and closing billion-dollar acquisitions. He now understood that real wealth wasn't found in boardroom applause or market wins but in sticky fingers, cereal spills, and bedtime stories read 3 times in a row. After breakfast, they spent the day painting a mural on the garage wall. Maya chose the colors, and he followed her lead. A big sun, clouds with hearts inside them, a daddy and daughter holding hands beneath a rainbow. When they finished, she stood back and grinned. "It looks happy now," she said. He nodded, paint on his cheeks, hands stained, but heart lighter than it had been in years. "Just like you." That evening, Darius sat on the back patio watching Maya run through the grass again, just like that first weekend after the trial. He was still learning how to parent without guilt, how to let go of the idea that protection meant perfection. But Maya didn't need perfect. She needed him. Fully. Always. Inside, his phone vibrated. A new business offer. An emergency call from the board. He ignored it. The only thing he answered was when Maya called out, "Daddy, look," and he turned to see her holding up a flower crown she made from the bushes they planted with the gardener last spring. She ran over and placed it on his head, laughing so hard she snorted. He wore it proudly. No suit, no title. Just her dad. The empire could wait. The world could turn without him for a while. Because in this house, under this sky, with this child beside him, Darius had found what he didn't even know he'd been searching for, a second chance dressed not in gold, but in yellow laughter. 2 months later, the Cole residence had a new energy, not from renovation or design, but from the heartbeat of something real, healing. Maya no longer whispered when she needed something. She no longer tiptoed through the house or flinched when footsteps echoed. She danced barefoot in the hallway. She laughed loudly while brushing her teeth. She bargained for extra minutes at bedtime. The scars on her arms had faded, but more importantly, the shadows in her eyes had begun to clear. Darius noticed every change. And every time she reached for his hand or called him from another room, it anchored him deeper into the role he now cherished more than anything else in the world. Father. Not guardian, not provider, not benefactor. Just father. Present. Human. Devoted. The case against Vanessa Griggs moved forward with growing momentum. More families had come forward, emboldened by Maya's story. One mother stood in court with tears in her eyes, thanking Darius for giving others the courage to speak out. He didn't respond. He only held Maya's hand tighter. The justice system, slow as it was, had begun to correct what it once ignored. But Darius didn't wait for verdicts. He created something new. That fall, a center opened downtown under Maya's name, the Little Light Foundation. A place where children could find safety, and where parents, especially single fathers, could find resources, therapy, training, and most of all, awareness. No PR campaign. No press conference. Just a quiet ribbon-cutting ceremony where Maya held the scissors and grinned as her name appeared on the sign. That night, she asked Darius, "Will other girls like me come here?" He nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. And they'll know they're not alone." She smiled and curled up beside him on the couch. "Can we bring them ice cream?" He laughed. "Every flavor." As she drifted off, head on his shoulder, Darius stared out the window. The city lights twinkled, and for the first time, they didn't feel distant or cold. He thought of his late wife, of all the moments missed, and all the ones still left to live. He whispered into Maya's hair, "I thought I built an empire. But I never knew what true legacy looked like until I saw the bruises I failed to prevent, and chose never to look away again." In that stillness, with his daughter sleeping peacefully at his side, Darius Cole didn't feel like a billionaire. He felt like something far greater, a man who had finally remembered how to love.